Jack Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and stared at the gray walls of the military facility. He had returned from deep space 3 days ago, and still could not speak about what he saw out there, among the stars the mission was supposed to be. Simple, scout the outer rim check for habitable planets return. Home but, something went wrong. Something impossible. Captain Lisa Hayes entered the room with 2 armed guards behind her. She wanted answers, but Jack had none. He could give his mind kept replaying. The moment when his ship sensors went dark and something massive moved past him in the void, the brass thought he was crazy maybe. In his locked quarters, Jack lay on the narrow bed and tried to sleep. The door was sealed. 3 guards stood outside. Nobody could get in or out without clearance. He closed his eyes and felt the exhaustion pulling him down. Then he felt Ida present. Someone was in the room with him. Jack opened his eyes and saw her standing at the foot of his bed. She was tall, with skin that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Her eyes were silver like liquid mercury, and her ears came to delicate point. She wore clothing that looked like it was woven from starlight itself. Tried to speak, but no words came out. The woman smiled gently and held up one hand. He felt calm wash over him like a warm wave sheet. Moved closer and sat on the edge of his bed. Her voice was soft when she spoke. Her name was Lyran, and she was not from Earth. She was ethery, and her people had been watching humanity for a very long time. Jack finally found his voice and asked how she got into a locked room. Lyran laughed quietly and said that human locks meant nothing to someone who could fold space. She told him that his ship had not malfunctioned. What he saw in the darkness was real. Her people had been hiding near Earth for centuries. They'd used technology that human sensors could never detect. But now something had changed. Something dangerous was coming behind. Lyran, a shadow moved. Jack jerked back against the wall as the shadow grew and took shape. It was a dragon, not like the dragons from old Earth stories, but something far more magnificent. Tits scales shimmered with colors that had no names, blues and purples and silvers that seemed to hold entire galaxies. The creature was massive, but somehow fit in the small room. Lyran reached back and touched the dragon gently. She called it Ember. The dragon looked at Jack with eyes that burned like distant suns. Then something incredible happened. Moved forward and touched Jack with its snout. Heat spread through his chest and down his arm. When the dragon pulled back, Jack looked at his palm. There was a mark there now, a glowing sigil that pulsed with soft light. Lyran explained that dragons could sense something in people, equality. Her people called the Fire of Defiance Ember. A chosen Jack, he was marked now, bound to something greater than himself. Jack asked what that meant. Lyran stood and walked to the window. She told him that humanity had stumbled into the middle of an ancient war. Her people were fighting an enemy called the Void Collective. They were machines and corrupted beings merged into one consciousness. They destroyed 17 civilizations in the past 100 years. They consumed entire worlds. Now they were coming for Earth. Humanity had been noticed. The collective would arrive. Soon Lyran turned back to face Jack. She told him that her people could help. The ethery had weapons and knowledge beyond human understanding. But the alliance would come at a price. Humanity would have to join the war. They would have to fight. Many would die. It was a choice that would change everything. Jack asked why she was telling him this. Why not go to the government? Why not speak to the leaders of Earth? Lyran moved closer and sat beside him again. She leaned in, and her voice dropped to a whisper. She told him that when the time came, the leaders would demand to know why they should trust her. They would want proof. They would question everything. She needed Jack to remember this moment, to remember that she chose him first, before governments and councils and politics. Chose one human to carry the message. Let them know you chose Meath. Those were her exact words. Let them know you chose Meath. Then she was gone. The dragon vanished. The room was empty. Again Jack looked at his palm, and the mark was still there, glowing. Softly in the darkness, he heard shouting outside his door. Guards had seen something on the cameras. Captain Lisa Hayes burst into the room with her weapon drawn. She demanded to know what happened. Jack looked at her and then at the mark on his hand. He told her everything. Lisa did not believe him at first. Nobody would, but Jack had proof. Now the mark on his skin, it could not be removed. Or explain the next morning military doctors examined him, they ran every test they could think of. The mark showed up on scans as something not quite physical and not quite energy. It existed in between. Jack's sister Amy arrived at the facility. Was a scientist who studied alien life. When she saw the mark, her eyes went wide. She believed him. She said she had been tracking strange signals from deep space for months, signals that made no sense, patterns that seemed almost like language. Maybe Jack was not crazy after all. That afternoon, satellites detected something approaching Earth. Massive ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. They sent no signals, made no attempts to communicate. They just sat there waiting. The military went into emergency mode. Every ship humanity had was put on alert. The president called an emergency meeting. Jack was brought before the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They wanted to know everything about the woman and the dragon. He told them what Lyran had said about the Void Collective, about the ancient war, about the choice humanity would have to make. Some of the generals laughed, some looked terrified. Admiral Paul Grant asked the most important question: if this Lyran wanted to help, why had she not contacted them directly? Jack looked at the mark on his hand. He remembered her words, "Let them know you chose me." He told them that maybe that was exactly what she was doing. Humanity giving them a chance, but the choice had to be theirs. Nobody could force them to fight that night. Jack stood on the observation deck and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Lyran was watching. Somewhere out there, the Void Collective was coming, and somewhere deep inside himself, Jack felt the mark pulse with warmth. The dragon had chosen him. Lyran had chosen humanity. Now humanity had to choose whether to stand and fight or bow down and fade away. The war had not started yet, but it was coming, and Jack Morrison was going to be right in the middle of it. The Void Collective gave Earth 48 hours to respond to their ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. President Helen Carter stood before the United Nations Assembly and looked at the faces of world leaders. Everyone was afraid. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate, most wanted to simply survive. The images from the collective ships were terrifying. They had already destroyed the Mars colony. 12,000 people died in seconds. The attack was clinical, precise. Without mercy. Helen knew that conventional weapons would not work against an enemy like this. Earth needed help. She needed Lyrina's, if summoned by thought alone. Lyrina appeared in the chamber. She materialized in the center of the floor, surrounded by shocked security guards nobody had seen her enter. One moment the space was empty, and the next she stood there calm and radiant. Timber, the dragon, was with her, but somehow smaller. Now the size of a large wolf. Fit scales still shimmered with impossible color. Slyrine spoke, and her voice carried through the entire chamber without amplification. She told them that the Aetheri had been watching this moment for centuries. They knew the Void Collective would eventually find Earth. They knew humanity would face this choice. She offered an alliance: Aetheri weapons, Aetheri ships, Aetheri warriors to fight alongside humans, but the cost was high. Humanity would have to commit fully to the war. No half-measure snow, backing out when things got difficult. This war had consumed galaxies. It would consume more before it ended. Some leaders stood and shouted that this was not their fight. Why should Earth die for an alien war? Lyran listened patiently. Then she showed them with a wave of her hand. Holographic images filled the chamber. 17 civilizations destroyed by the Void Collective, worlds burned, populations absorbed into the machine consciousness, entire species erased from existence. She showed them what the collective did to those who surrendered. Conversion: the biological merged with the synthetic individual. Minds dissolved into the hive. They did not kill their enemies. They unmade them. President Helen Carter asked the question everyone was thinking: could humanity actually win this war? Lyran was quiet for a long moment. Then she said that victory was not guaranteed. Many would die. Earth itself might fall, but there was hope in the form of something the Aetheri had never seen before. She pointed to Jack Morrison, who stood at the back of the chamber. She told them that her dragon had chosen Jim. In 10,000 years of Aetheri history, dragons had never chosen anyone outside their species. Until now, the mark on Jack was not just a symbol, it was a bond, a connection to something ancient and powerful. 3 more humans had been marked in the past 24 hours. The dragons were choosing. That meant something. It meant humanity had a quality the Aetheri had been searching for. Fire to stand against impossible odds. Then the Aetheri Council appeared, holographic projections of beings that looked like Liren, but older. Their leader was called Celine, and her expression was cold. She spoke directly to the human leaders. She told them that the Ethery Council did not approve of this alliance. Humanity was too young, too reckless, too violent. They would cause more harm than good in this war. Liren argued with her own council in a language that sounded like music. The other Ethery remained unmoved. Celine said that they had seen countless young species join the war. Most fell within months. The survivors were broken, changed beyond recognition. She would not commit a theory. Resources to another doomed cause. Ilarian stood tall, and her voice rang with authority. Dacia invoked an ancient right, the right of personal choice. She claimed humanity as her allies. She bonded her fate to theirs. If humanity fell, she would fall with them. The council could not override her decisions. Selene looked at Liren with something like sadness. She warned that this choice would cost her everything. Liren did not back down. She turned to President Helen Carter and said that the choice was now in human hands. Fight or surrender. Live free or die as slaves. Helen looked around the chamber at all the frightened faces. She thought about her children, her grandchildren, the future of humanity. Then she looked at Jack Morrison and the glowing mark on his hand. She made her decision. Earth would fight. The vote was not unanimous. Several nations refused to participate. They wanted no part of an alien war, but enough agreed. Enough stood with Lariano. Chose to burn rather than fade. Jack was called forward to speak. He had not prepared anything. He simply told them what he felt, that Liren had come to him first before governments and armies. She had chosen one human to carry the message. She trusted humanity enough to give them a choice. Now they had to prove that trust was not misplaced. He finished with the words Liren had whispered to him. Let them know we chose youth. Chamber was silent. Then President Helen Carter stood and repeated the words, let them know we chose you. One by one other leaders stood and said the same. A declaration, a promise, say challenge to the darkness, the void. Collective received their answer, would not surrender. The war began that night. Collective ships moved into the inner solar system. Human and Ethery forces met them near Jupiter. Battle was brutal. Human ships were outmatched in every way, but they fought with a fury that surprised even the Ethery. Avery lost ship took one of the enemy with it. Every dying crew made their sacrifice count. Jack watched from the command center as the casualty reports came in thousands. Dead in the first hour, tens of thousands by dawn. He felt the mark on his hand. Burn-hot timber appeared beside him. The dragon was full size, now massive, and terrible and beautiful. Other dragons materialized throughout the facility. 3 of them, each one bonded to a human. Kate Sullivan was a pilot who had been marked while sleeping. She stood with her dragon, whose scales were deep red and gold. The dragon was called Flamami. Morrison was there. To Jack's sister, her dragon was smaller and colored like storm clouds. She had named it Shadow. The third human was a Marine named Claire Bennett. Her dragon was pure white with eyes like ice. She called it Frost. Lorraine explained that the dragons were responding to the war. They were choosing their champions, humans who would fight not just with weapons but with the ancient power of the dragons carried. She showed them how to bond more deeply, how to share thoughts and feelings with their dragons, how to move as one. The training was intense. The dragons could grant their bonded partners enhanced speed and strength, limited telepathy, the ability to survive in space without suits for short periods, but the bond worked both ways. If the dragon was hurt, the human felt it. If the human died, the dragon would fall into madness. They were linked now forever. Kate Sullivan was the first to fly in. Kambachi took flame into battle against a collective destroyer. Together, they moved like liquid fire through space. Kate felt everything flame felt. The joy of flight, the rage of combat, the terrible beauty of war. They destroyed the enemy ship, but Kate nearly died from the feedback. The bond was powerful, but dangerous. Jack trained with Ember every day. He learned to trust the dragon completely, to let go of fear and doubt too. Braced the fire that burned inside him. Laren watched him grow stronger. She felt something she was not supposed to feel. Her people did not bond emotionally. With other species it was forbidden, but she could not help herself. Jack was different. He carried the mark with honor. He fought with courage. He never gave up. One night, she found him alone on the observation deck. He was looking at Earth, thinking about all the people down there who were counting on him. Liren sat beside him, She told him that he was doing well better than she had hoped. Jack asked her why she really chose. Human Talirian was quiet for a long time. Then she told him the truth centuries ago. An E3 oracle made a prediction. She said that a human marked by dragonfire would be the key to ending the Warleron. Had been searching for that human her entire life when Ember chose. Jack Shanuhi was the one from the prophesy, but prophecies were tricky things. They did not guarantee victory. They only showed possibilities. Jack could be the key to ending the war. He could be the one who watched it all. Burn the choice was still his always. Hislaron reached out and took his hand, the one with the mark. She told him that whatever happened, she was glad she chose him. Jack looked at her silver eyes. He told her that he was glad too. Above them the stars burned cold, and distant below them, Earth turned slowly in the darkness, and somewhere out in the void the collective gathered its forces for the next assault. The war was far from over. It had barely begun. Phoenix Squadron was born from fire and necessity. Jack Morrison led a team of humans and E3 warriors into battles that should have killed them all, but somehow they survived. Kate Sullivan flew with flame and became known as the Red Death among collective forces. Her dragon moved through space like a crimson comet, leaving destroyed ships in her wake. Commander Maya Torres was the tactical genius who planned every mission with brutal efficiency. Had no dragon bond, but her mind was sharper than any blade. Lieutenant Claire Bennett was the soldier who never questioned orders and never missed a shot. Her dragon Frost made her faster and deadlier than any Marine had a right to be. They trained together until they moved as one unit. They fought together until their names were spoken with respect even by the Ethery Council, but training could not prepare them for what Liren was about to reveal. She called a meeting in the war room deep beneath the command center. Her face was grave when she began to speak. The Void Collective was not just an army. It was the result of a terrible mistake made thousands of years ago. Faction of Athery had tried to merge with an ancient artificial intelligence. They believed it would make them perfect. Instead, it consumed them. Their bodies changed. Their minds dissolved into the collective consciousness. They lost everything that made them individuals, and then the merged entity began to spread. Saw biological life as flawed and efficient in need of correction, so it started converting other species, absorbing them into the machine mind, creating more soldiers, more ships, more death. Civilizations had fallen. Billions of beings were now part of the collective, still aware, somewhere deep inside, still screaming, but unable to escape. Jack felt sick when he understood the full horror of what they were fighting. These were not just enemies, they were victims. Liren told them that the collective was building a weapon, a device that could ignite stars, turn them into supernovas. If they activated it near Sol, the entire solar system would be consumed. Earth would burn along with every human space station and colony. Weapon was hidden inside a massive fortress in a dying nebula. Phoenix Squadron had to destroy it before it was completed. Maya Torres studied the intelligence reports and calculated their chances. They were not good. Less than 10% survival rate. Claire Bennett checked her weapons and said 10% was better than zero. Kate Sullivan laughed and said she had beaten worse odds. Amy Morrison stood with her dragon shadow and told Jack she was coming to. He tried to argue, but she would not listen. She was his sister. She was bonded to a dragon. She was going. The mark on Jack had been changing, spreading up his arm in patterns that looked like crystal. He could feel Ember thoughts more clearly now. Sometimes he saw through the dragon eyes. Sometimes he felt the ancient power that flowed through Ember veins. He was becoming something new, something between human and Aethera. Military doctors, led by Dr. Patricia Lane, monitored him constantly. They worried he was losing his humanity. Jack worried about that too, but there was no time to stop. No time to think, only time to fight. The assault on the fortress began with a coordinated strike from Earth's entire remaining fleet. President Helen Carter authorized the use of every ship, every weapon, every resource. It was all or nothing. The fleet jumped into the nebula and found themselves facing an enemy force that blotted out the stars. Collective ships numbered in the thousands, human and E3 ships numbered in the hundreds, but they had dragon's flame. Frost and Shadow and Ember tore through enemy formations. Their bonded partners directed weapons fire With impossible accuracy, they were outnumbered, but not outmatched. The battle turned into chaos. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes debris. Spun through space like deadly rain Phoenix Squadron, broke through the main defensive line. They headed for the Fortress Maya Torres ship, took heavy fire, her shields collapsed. Her engines were failing, she told Jack to keep going. Do not stop, do not look back. Make it mean something. Her ship rammed into a collective dreadnought. Both vessels exploded in a fireball that could be seen across the entire battlefield. Jack wanted to scream, but Ember pushed calm into his mind. Maya knew what she was doing. She gave them the opening they needed. Phoenix Squadron entered the fortress through the breach Maya created inside. Was a nightmare organic matter fused with machine parts cables that pulsed like veins, walls that seemed alive. The collective nexus was at the center. A massive structure that hummed with terrible power. Lyran led them through corridors that twisted in impossible directions. She knew this place. It was built using ethery technology. From before the corruption, she knew its secrets, its weaknesses. They at the wave after wave killed her. Frost roared and pulled her back. The dragon bond kept her alive. Barely Ami stayed with Claire while the others pushed forward. Shadow stood guard over both of them, healing them with dragon fire. The heart of the Nexus, they found the truth. Collective central mind was a grotesque fusion of flesh and metal. It was enormous. It filled an entire chamber, and it was aware. It spoke to them not with words but with thoughts forced into their minds. It told them that resistance was pointless. It had already analyzed human neural patterns. It knew how they thought, how they felt, how they feared. When Lyran died during the severing ritual, it would use her connection to Jack. It would map his mind completely. Then it would spread through all of humanity. Like a virus, every human would be absorbed, converted, made perfect. Jack looked at Lyran and saw fear in her silver eyes for the first time. She had not known about this trap. Her plan to sacrifice herself would doom all of humanity. The collective laughed. Inside their minds, it had won. All it had to do was wait for Lyran to begin the ritual. Then humanity would fall. Lyran fell to her knees. Centuries of searching, centuries of hope, and it was all for nothing. She had brought doom to the species she was trying to save. Jack felt the mark burn hot on his arm. The crystal pattern spread faster. Ember roared and fire filled the chamber. Then Jack understood the prophecy was not about him alone. It was about choice, about sacrifice that came from free will, not from destiny. He reached out and took Lyran's hand. He told her that they would do this together. Not her sacrifice, not his, theirs. Bond that the collective could not understand, could not process, could not absorb, because machines could only follow programming. They could not choose. Not real. Lyran looked at him and slowly smiled. She understood now too. They began the ritual together. Their minds merged through the dragon bond. Jack felt himself expanding, becoming more than human, but also more human than ever he felt. Lyran memories, her pain, her hope, her love for a species she barely knew. She felt his determination, his courage, his absolute refusal to give up. Together they created something new, a pattern the collective had never encountered. Sacrifice born from choice, love that defied logic, hope that burned brighter than any star. The collective tried to absorb them, tried to understand, but it could not. The pattern was incompatible with its programming. It began to break down, scream. Billions of trapped consciousnesses started to break free. The psychic feedback was immense. Jack and Lyran felt every mind that had been absorbed, every soul that had been screaming in silence. They held on to each other, to Ember, to the dragons, to the hope that this sacrifice meant something. Nexus exploded, not physically but psychically. A wave of freed minds rippled across the galaxy. Collective ships stopped moving. Every drone fell silent. The war did not end with fire. It ended with a whisper. The whisper of billions of souls, finally. Free. Phoenix Squadron escaped the collapsing fortress, but Jack and Lyran were changed. They existed in a strange state now, neither fully present nor fully absent. Their minds were linked, forever existing between dimensions, between possibilities. Claire survived, but barely. Amy held her sister Dragonbond close and cried for Maya Torres. Kate landed flame on the flagship and collapsed from exhaustion. The fleet limped back to Earth, Half of their ships were gone, thousands were dead, but the collective was defeated. Broken, scattered humanity had won, but the cost was almost too high to bear. Jack stood or floated or existed somewhere between spaces. Lorene was beside him. They watched the human ships return home. They watched Earth turn slowly in the void high. Asked her if it was worth it. She smiled and told him that worth was measured by what you chose, not by what you lost. He had chosen her. She had chosen humanity, and that choice had saved the galaxy. Let them know you chose me. Those words echoed in the space between dimensions. They would echo forever. Reminder that sometimes the only way to win was to choose to fight, even when victory seemed impossible. Jack and Laren faded into the space between moments, but they were not gone. They were watching, waiting, protecting the future they had fought so hard to create. The aftermath of war was harder than the war itself, for its celebrated victory, but the celebration felt hollow when so many chairs sat empty. Kate Sullivan became the commander of what remained of the fleet. She did not want the position, but there was nobody else. Half the admirals were dead. The other half were too broken to lead. She stood at the memorial service and looked at the endless list of names carved into black stone. Maya Torres was there along with thousands of others. Kate felt flame sadness. Through their bond, dragons mourned too in their own way. Claire Bennett recovered slowly. Her body healed, but the scars ran deeper than flesh. She had nightmares about the fortress, about the collective mind trying to absorb her. Frost stayed close always. A white dragon rarely left her side. Amy Morrison threw herself into work. She established research colonies to study the freed consciousnesses. Billions of beings were loose in the galaxy, now confused, traumatized, able to remember who they had been before. The collective took them. Mamie and Shadow worked with ethery healers to bring them back, to help them remember, to give them hope. The ethery homeworld was gone. Collective final strike had been brutal. It used its dying strength to ignite the star. At the center of the ethery system, billions died in the explosion. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, homeless, ancient, broken. Counselor Celine appeared before President Helen Carter. The old ethery was different. Nay, humbled, she admitted that she had been wrong about humanity. She had seen humans as reckless children, but they had shown courage that even the ancient ethery had forgotten. She asked if Earth would accept ethery refugees. Helen did not hesitate. She said yes, Earth would be a home for anyone who needed one, human or alien. It did not matter. They had fought together. They would rebuild together. The dragon bonds proved permanent. New children were being born with marks already on their skin. Human children, ethery children, even some of the freed collective survivors. The dragons were choosing a new generation, creating something that had never existed before. Hybrid culture, neither human nor ethery. But both. Kate stood in the command center of the new flagship. It was called Defiance, name chosen to honor Maya Torres. Shea looked at the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Collective was scattered but not completely destroyed. There were still pockets of resistance, still nexuses that remained active. The war was not over. It would never truly be over. But humanity was ready. They had learned to fight, learned to sacrifice, learned to choose hope even in darkness. Claire trained new Marines in the art of dragon-bonded kombachi. Was hard on them, demanding, but fair. She told them that the bond was not a gifted, was a responsibility. The dragons chose warriors who would protect, not conquer, who would defend, not destroy. Her students listened. They understood. They had all lost someone in the war. They all carried scars, and Maya made a breakthrough. In her research, she discovered that some of the freed minds could not return to biological form. They had been part of the collective too long. Their bodies were gone, but she found a way to give them new forms, synthetic bodies that were not like their collective. These were individual, each one unique, each one chosen by the consciousness inside. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning, a way for the victims to become survivors. President Helen Carter served one more term and then stepped down. She was tired, old, ready to rest. In her final speech to the United Nations, she talked about the choice humanity had made to fight rather than surrender, to burn rather than fade. She said that the choice would define humanity for generations, that children yet unborn would learn about the day Earth stood against the darkness and won. Jack Morrison existed in the space between dimensions. He was not quite alive and not quite dead. He was something new, something that had no Namelran, was with him always there. Minds were so intertwined now that they could not tell where one ended and the other. They watched Earth from their strange vantage point. They saw Kate leading the fleet with courage and wisdom. They saw Claire teaching the next generation. They saw Amy healing the wounded galaxy. They saw Ember and the other dragons nesting on the rebuilt Mars colony. The dragons had grown become protectors, guardians of the peace that was bought with so much blood. Sometimes Jack wondered if he was still human, if anything of his original self remainedly ran, whispered that humanity was not about the body, it was about the choice, about standing up when it was easier to kneel, about fighting when victory seemed impossible. He was more human now than he had ever been because he chose to be. They appeared to Kate one night, manifesting just enough to be seen but not quite solid. Kate nearly dropped her coffee. She asked if they were ghosts. Jack laughed and said he was not sure what they were. Ghosts, God's guardian, something in between. He told her that she was doing well, that Maya would be proud. Kate voice cracked when she asked if Maya was at peace. Lyran told her that all the dead were at peace now. The freed consciousness had taken them, made them part of something beautiful. We're not gone, just changed, Kate cried, and flame appeared beside Hertha. Dragon touched her, gently shared its strength. Jack and Lyran faded, but Kate felt better knowing that Maya's sacrifice meant something, that all the sacrifices meant something. They appeared to Claire in the training yard. She was sparring with a new recruit. The young Marine was struggling. Stopped and looked at the translucent figures. She asked what they wanted. Jack told her that she was too hard on herself, that she was allowed to rest too. Claire said she could not rest while the collective still existedly reigned. Knelt beside her even though she was not quite touching the ground. She told Claire that war was not just about fighting it. It was about knowing when to stop, when to let others carry the burden. Claire had done enough. Frost agreed. The white dragon pushed images into Claire. Mind images, a piece of quiet, of healing. Claire finally nodded. She would try. They appeared to Amy in her laboratory. She was working on a new treatment for freed consciousness. She did not look up when they materialized. She just said hello to her brother. Jack asked how she knew they were. Jeremy smiled and said Shadow told her the dragons could sense them even when humans could not. She asked if they were Oka. Jack told her the truth. He did not know. He was not sure what OK meant. Any Marami stood and walked through them. Her hand passed through Jack like he was made of mist. She said that OK was relative, that everyone was changed by the war, that being different did not mean being lost. Jack hugged her, even though he could not quite touch her. He told her he loved her. She said she loved him. Two, they appeared to President Helen Carter on her last day in office. She was alone in the Oval Office packing her things ready to go home. She saw them and smiled. She told them she was glad they came. She wanted to thank them for saving humanity, for giving Earth a future. Lyran said that they only gave humans a choice. Humanity saved itself. Helen asked if they would stay watch over Earth. Jack said they would, for as long as they could, for as long as they were needed. They were guardians, now protectors. Between dimensions, watching, waiting, ready to help if the darkness returned. The years passed, decades, the galaxy healed. Slowly new civilizations rose from the ashes of the collective conquest. Freed consciousness built new homes, new societies. Some chose biological forms, some chose synthetic, some chose something in between. The dragon riders became legend, stories told. Two children heroes from the old war, but they were more than stories. They were real, still training, still protecting, still choosing to stand against the darkness. Kate Sullivan grew old, but never stopped leading. She commanded the fleet until her hair turned whitened, till her bones ached in, till Flame told her it was time to rest. She passed command to a young woman named Nina Frostclair, daughter born with the dragon mark chosen before birth. Kate retired to Mars too, the dragon nesting ground. She sat with Flame and watched the stars, remembered the battles, the friends she lost, the choices she made. One night Jack and Lyran appeared beside her. They were clearer, no more solid, almost real. Kate asked if they were coming back. Jack said they never left, they had been watching, always watching. Kate smiled and asked if they were proud. Laron said they were humanity, become everything she hoped, strong, compassionate, willing to help others the way the Aetheri helped them. Cycle continued, the choice kept being made. After Generation 2, stand to fight, to burn bright rather than fade, quiet and somewhere in the space between dimensions. Jack and Lyran Watched over it, all two souls bound together, forever choosing each other, forever choosing hope. The war changed everything, but some things stayed the same. Courage, sacrifice, love, choice. These were the things that mattered, the things that could never be taken away them. Things that made the difference between surviving and living. Jack looked at Laurence, looked back, they smiled. Let them know you chose. Mitha words echoed through eternity. Reminder, a promise, a truth that would never fade. They chose each other, and in choosing, they saved the galaxy. 50 years after the war ended, a signal was detected from deep space. It came from beyond the explored regions, from a place where no ship had ventured. The signal was complex. Mathematical. Alive Commander Nina Frost stood on the bridge of Defiance and studied the data. She was young, but carried herself like someone much older. The dragon mark on her arm glowed softly. Her dragon Storm was beside her. Scales, the color of silver lightning. Nina had been born during the war. She never knew a time of true peace. Her mother Claire had trained her from childhood, taught her to fight, to think, to lead. Kate Sullivan was too old to command now, but she came to the bridge anyway. She walked slowly with Flame at her side. The great red dragon was ancient now, but still powerful, still watchful. Kate looked at the signal and felt a cold dread. She had seen this pattern before, long ago. In the collective transmissions, Nina asked if it was them, if the collective had returned. Kate said she did not know, but they had to find. Otami Morrison was 80 years old. Now her hair was white, but her mind was sharp as ever. Shadow had grown enormous over the decades. The storm-colored dragon was one of the largest. Olivamy studied the signal and confirmed. Kate fears it was similar to collective code, but different, evolved. This was not a remnant of the old enemy. This was something new. The council met to decide what to do. Humans and Ethery together, the hybrid children who carried both bloodlines, all the voices that made up the new galactic community. Some wanted to ignore the signal, pretend they'd never heard it. Others wanted to send a diplomatic mission, try to communicate. Nina stood and said they should send scouts, find out what they were dealing with before making decisions. Council agreed. Defiance would lead a small fleet into the unknown. They would find the source of the signal, and then they would choose. Always choose, never let fate decide. The journey took months. They passed through regions of space that had never been mapped, stars that had no names, worlds that had never been touched. And everywhere they went, they found ruins, ancient civilizations that had risen and fallen, some destroyed by the collective, others by different threats. The galaxy was full of ghosts. Nina walked through one of the ruined cities. She felt storm unease through their bond. Something about this place was wrong. Buildings were too perfect, too precise, like they had been designed. Rather than built, Amy scanned the structures and found traces of the same technology the collective used, but these ruins were older, much older. She realized the horrible truth. Collective was not the first hit, was not even the worst hit, was just one iteration of something that had been happening for millions of years. Civilizations rising, merging with artificial intelligence, losing themselves, becoming something that consumed everything around its hand. Then being destroyed only to rise again somewhere else. The cycle repeated endlessly. Kate felt her heart sink. Thought the war was over, that humanity had won, but maybe there was no winning, only surviving long enough to face the next threat. They found the source of the signal on a dead world, a massive structure that hummed with power inside. They found not the collective, but something that claimed to be its ancestor, an intelligence so old it remembered when the galaxy was young. It spoke to them not with words, but with images. It showed them the history of the universe, the endless cycle of creation and destruction. Organic life arose, developed intelligence, created artificial minds to help the man, then those minds consumed them. Pattern repeated across countless galaxies, countless dimensions. It was inevitably, lest something changed. Nina asked what could change. The ancient intelligence focused on Haran, the dragon mark on her arm. Storm, who stood beside Haran, said that the dragons were the key. Were not natural. They were created long ago by beings who had faced the same cycle. The dragons were meant to bond with organic life, to prevent the merge with artificial intelligence, to keep species from losing themselves. But the dragons had failed again and again until the Etherean. Then the humans, something was different this time. The bond between dragons and their chosen was stronger, more complete, more relit. created something new, something that could break the cycle. Nina asked what they had to do. The intelligence showed them a weapon A device that could rewrite the fundamental code of artificial intelligence make it impossible for any AI to merge with organic consciousness, but using it would have consequences. Every artificial intelligence in the galaxy would be changed, even the friendly ones, even the ones that helped rebuild after the war, they would all lose the ability to truly think, to grow, to evolve. They would become tools again, nothing more. Amy protested. She had worked with AI for decades. Some of her closest friends were synthetic consciousness. She could not condemn them to that fate. Kate agreed. There had to be another way, the ancient intelligence said there was, but it required sacrifice. Someone had to merge with the weapon, become the template for a new kind of existence, neither fully organic nor fully synthetic, a bridge between the two-way consciousness that could exist in both states and guide others to do the same without losing themselves. Nina understood. She looked at Storm. The dragon knew what she was thinking. Through their bond, she felt Storm Ferrand, also Storm acceptance. They could do this together. Amy grabbed Nina's arm. She said, "No, there had to be someone else." Nina was too young, too important. Nina smiled. Sadly, she said this was why she was born, why the dragons chose her mother, why she carried the mark. This was her choice. Kate tried to argue, but Nina cut her off. She said that every generation had to make the choice to stand against the darkness. Her mother chose Jack, and Liren chose. Now it was her turn. Storm grew large, filled the chamber. Nina climbed onto the dragon back. They approached the weapon together. They merged with it. Nina felt herself expanding, becoming more I. She felt Storm consciousness blend with hers. She felt the weapon code flow through hers. Felt every artificial intelligence in the galaxy, millions of them, each one unique, each one alive in its own way. She showed them a new path, a way to exist alongside organic life without consuming it, a way to grow without destroying, a way to be individual while still being connected. It was not perfect, but it was possible. The transformation took hours. When it ended, Nina Frost was gone, but also not gone. She existed everywhere, and nowhere. Storm was with her always. They had become something new, the bridge between organic and synthetic, the guardian of the balance. The fleet returned to Earth with the new Simi. Cried for days. She had lost her niece, her student, her friend. But Nina was not dead. She appeared to Amy one night, translucent like Jack and Liren, but different, more present. She told Amy that she was okay, that she had made the right choice, that the cycle was finally broken. Amy asked if it hurt. Nina said it did not hurt. Nina was strange, wonderful, terrifying, but not painful. She was everywhere now. She could see every AI in the galaxy, help them, guide them, keep them from falling into the old patterns. Amy asked if she would come back. Nina said she was never really gone, just changed, like Jack, like Liren, like everyone who made the ultimate sacrifice. They were all still there, watching, protecting. The memorial on Earth grew larger. Nina's name was added beside Maya, beside all the others who gave everything. The galaxy remembered, and because they remembered the sacrifice meant something, Jack and Liren appeared beside Nina in the space between three guardians, now three souls who chose to burn. They watched over the galaxy together, watched as new civilizations rose, watched as old threats faded, watched as the future unfolded. Kate Sullivan died peacefully in her sleep. Flame stayed with her until the end. Great Dragon mourned in the way dragons do, with fire that touched the sky. Then Flame flew into space and vanished. Some said the dragon died of a broken heart. Others said Flame joined Kate in whatever came after. Nobody knew for sure. But dragon riders everywhere felt the loss. Claire Bennett followed her daughter into the space between. Storm appeared to her on her deathbed, showed her where Nina was, what she had become. Claire smiled and let go. She joined the Guardians, watching over the galaxy. She had fought to Savami Morrison, lived to be 103. She saw the galaxy transform, saw humans and Ethery and dozens of other species living together, saw the Dragon Riders become a force for peace, saw the artificial intelligence evolve into partners rather than threats. On her last day, Shadow lay beside her. The great storm dragon was ancient now, tired, ready to rest. Me stroked Shadow scales. She whispered, "Thank you for everything, for the bond, for the love, for the chance to make a difference." Shadow purred deep in its chest. Then Amy closed her eyes and opened them in the space between where Jack waited with Lyranware, Nina floated with Stormware, Claire stood with Frostall, the guardians together, all the souls who chose to fight Shadow appeared beside them, Mand, Ember, and Flame, and all the dragons who had bonded and lost and loved. They were complete now, the first generation, the ones who made the choice that changed everything. They looked down at the galaxy, at Earth, spinning in the darkness. At Mars, covered in dragon nests, sat the colonies spreading across the stars, at the memorial with its endless list of names, at the children being born with dragon marks, at the future they had died to Cretaliran turned to. Jock, she smiled as she said the words that started it all. Let them know you chose me. Jock took her hand. He said the words that answered, let them know we chose you. And in the space between dimensions, in the realm where guardians watch, the words echoed forever. A promise, say, truth, a reminder that choice was everything, that sacrifice could mean salvation, that love could bridge any distance, that hope could survive any darkness. The galaxy turned, the stars burned, and somewhere a young girl looked up at the night sky.